My name is Steffi Marchman, the Marketing and Sales Specialist here at Notre Dame Press, and it is my pleasure to present the ins and outs of academic publishing, a conversation with Notre Dame Press staff. In this event, we will discuss what a university press is before delving into the different careers available within the industry. Our two fantastic panelists today are Michelle Seibert, Assistant Director, and Matt Dowd, Managing Editor. After their presentation, there will be time for you to ask any questions you might have about publishing. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Steffi. And I'll mention too, we really want this to be a conversation. So if you have questions throughout, or if we say something that you're intrigued by, feel free to completely redirect the conversation. The goal is really to give you guys a great experience and to get to know academic publishing and the careers involved. So don't feel like you have to save your questions for the end. If we say something intriguing and you just want to spend the rest of the hour talking about that, that's fine. We are here to talk about publishing. We love what we do, and we want to get other people excited about that as well. So the first thing we want to talk about is, what is a university press anyway? What is this weird creature we're going to spend the rest of an hour on? University presses are both a business, but also an academically minded, mission driven nonprofit publisher. So, this can be a little bit of a challenge in that we're both working toward scholarship and toward having a lasting legacy, toward engaging conversations, but also we want to make sure we're making money as well to ensure that we can continue publishing. So we are nonprofit. Any money we make is invested back into the books. And as we'll talk about later, most of the books don't actually make money in the sense of a commercial book that you might expect, but that's true for commercial publishing as well, in that there are a handful of super huge best-selling books that end up funding the rest of the program. So we'll get more into that. It's kind of a crazy thing about publishing that's really neat. The other thing that's great about university presses is that we focus on publishing work of scholarly, intellectual, or creative merit. So there needs to be some sort of value in the books. We're again not just pushing to make a ton of money and all retire to the Bahamas. We're also part of the scholarly ecosystem. We extend the reach and the impact of our parent institution, including here at Notre Dame, and we also partner with libraries, independent bookstores, museums, and others who serve readers and who work toward engaging in spreading knowledge and learning. The Association of University Presses includes 158 presses, which cover almost every region of North America, and we also have 20 outside of North America as well. So you can see almost every state and almost every area of Canada as well is covered with the university press. Together, these 158 presses publish approximately 12,000 books and 1,500 journals, so have a really great impact on books and on learning. So why do we exist anyway? Why do we do this crazy endeavor of business and scholarship? University presses add a great deal of value, and we have an entire handout here that you're welcome to grab and take with you that will get into this in far more detail than you ever wanted to know. But I want to touch on three major areas. The first is we have an impact on society. University presses connect the great work and research that's conducted on university campuses with other scholars, policymakers, readers, and thinkers around the world. University presses also give voice to underrepresented groups and experiences, including diverse voices, regional and local culture and history, and more specialized topics that a commercial publisher might decide isn't going to be successful enough to publish a book in. Often university presses lead the cutting edge of what's considered sellable, and after we prove that it can be done, then a commercial press will pick it up and run with it and ensure that those voices and those ideas are represented in the book world. University presses also add a great deal of value to scholarship. They add to scholarly work through careful editorial development, and through peer review and through a faculty editorial board, help test the validity and soundness of scholarship. They serve as a form of vetting or a stamp of approval. For established authors, for senior scholars, this may be less of a big deal, but it's instrumental to new authors and new scholars who are starting out in their career, and can serve a key role in the hiring and the tenure process. University presses also promote the translation of important works into English and help connect scholars worldwide. In addition, we have a mission to serve our communities. As I mentioned earlier, we extend the mission, influence, and brand of our parent institution, but we also serve as a resource for faculty, administrators, students, and we offer publishing expertise, hands-on learning opportunities, and on-the-job training through our internship program. We've got some brochures there if you're interested in that as well. And we also publish books of interest to our local communities and to broader regional scholarship. So for example, you might not expect Random House or Penguin and Schuster to publish books on the culture of Indiana or even the culture of South Bend. But we have some great books that highlight the history and the legacy of Notre Dame in a way that's so important to our community and tells stories that are really important to campus and to ensuring that people understand our history. University presses also play a role in experimenting with and developing new platforms for engaging with scholarship. Again, we prove something's possible, and then everybody else will run with it. So that's why university presses, but why Notre Dame Press? What do we do? Notre Dame Press is the largest Catholic university press in the world. You'll notice there's a number of adjectives there to make that a true statement, but I can say that with all those adjectives together. We have 14 full-time staff who publish an average of 55 books every year, and we publish both academic and general interest, or what sometimes we call trade books. These are the books that you might read for fun. They're kind of your everyday learning type of books. The subject areas that we publish in align with the academic strengths of Notre Dame. They include religion, theology, history, philosophy, political science and theory, medieval studies, and Latin American studies. So a lot of the departments that you guys mentioned that you're from. Our authors include leading experts and scholars from around the globe, including Singapore, the United Kingdom, Italy, and more. We do publish faculty members here at Notre Dame, but most of our authors actually come from other universities and even other countries. Matt will get a little bit more into why that is later on. We also partner with more than 20 different campus departments, institutes, and organizations, including the Creative Writing Program, the Devers Program in Dante Studies, the Alliance for Catholic Education, De Nicola Center for Ethics and Culture, and many, many more. So again, we help pool our resources together and ensure these connections and ensure scholarly learning. And from there, I believe I'm going to hand it off to Matt to talk a little bit about our process.
Okay, great. So we're going to be trading off here some to talk about some of the different things that happen in the course of a manuscript or an idea becoming a book. Um, I am the managing editor, which means my specialty and what I really work on is when the books have been approved and have reached my desk. It means we're definitely making books out of them. I'm going to start working on the text. I'm going to be hiring people to try to improve the text. We've got a whole department called EDP, Editorial Design and Production, that's going to make the books. But before we can do that, we actually have to get books. We have to get manuscripts. And that's the purview of the acquisitions department. I've done a little bit of acquisitions work, but I am by no means an acquisitions editor. So you're free to ask questions. I'll tell you what I can, but acquisitions is a particular niche in what we do, and so that's it's an important element to get the book started. So I will reiterate one of the things Michelle mentioned already. Well, actually, I guess the first thing I should say, excuse me, is that we're going to be talking primarily about books. We're going to be talking about books in mostly humanities and a bit in the social sciences. That's what we do. I will also say that the way we do things may be slightly different from the way other academic publishers work. There will be different roles for different people. They might have a different sequence of events for certain things, but broadly speaking, these kinds of things are fairly common across the industry. So, we are housed at a university. We are an academic unit, but we are unlike a lot of other academic units in that we have a lot of money we have to spend. We have to print books, we have to market books, and therefore we have to make income. We have to have money come in. So when we're choosing the books to publish, we have to balance that financial consideration with the academic mission, with being able to publish books that are important to scholarship but might not sell a lot of books. On the other hand, we want to find some of the books that do sell that we can reach a broader audience because the ideas are good. We're going to do our best to reach as big an audience as we can. Our press director likes to say that the work of the acquisitions editor is to find the right kind of book for us to publish. So we publish about 60 new books a year. We aren't necessarily trying to publish the best 60 books that we could find. We're trying to find the best, or the 60 books that we can publish best, meaning that we can reach an audience, that we can develop in the way we need to, that we can produce in ways that will serve the purpose of that book. So that being said, let's talk a little bit more about acquisitions. So if you go to our website, you will find there are instructions about how to submit a proposal. So we get a lot of cold submissions. Just people have looked around at publishers. They decide they like Notre Dame Press, and so they send us a proposal. That could be anything from a couple of pages, which is what we actually ask for, to people sending us whole manuscripts at once and hoping we're just going to read their manuscript, decide it needs to be a book, and publish it. Gets a little more complicated than that, of course. So we end up rejecting the vast majority of the things that come to us. Sometimes they're not projects that are worth publishing yet, or are not the kind of book we would publish. They might not be an academic book like we have, but more often it's because the kind of book, the topic of it is going to be more appropriate for another publisher. Michelle already mentioned some of our specialties: religion, theology, Latin American studies, medieval studies. But we'll get projects through all sorts of topics. But if we can't reach an audience with it, it's not worth us publishing it. It's not going to reach the audience it needs to. It's going to cost money. It's not going to do what the author wants it to either. So in many places, we'll send that off to, or we'll suggest they go somewhere else with it. Yeah, you had a question.
So who exactly are the audiences that Notre Dame Press is most, I guess, confident in reaching?
Which audiences are we most confident in reaching? So it's a somewhat complicated question. We talk about lists. So we have a theology list, we have a philosophy list. That just means sort of the kinds of books we have published in the past and that we're still comfortable publishing. Um, and some of the topics, Catholic theology, obviously at Notre Dame is going to be important, but or at least that there's a relevance to Catholic theology. We're not going to necessarily limit it to that, but we're not going to publish what's the cutting edge Presbyterian theology, right? Because there are other publishers that would do that better. Um, but you asked in terms of what are the best audiences. Um, that will shift depending on what it is we're publishing. The acquisitions editors that come in, they may have specialties that may bring new ideas, bring in some new authors. For example, our press director right now, Steve Wren, specializes in political theory, and so while we had done some of that before he came, we're now much stronger in that. And so, but we have to develop an audience. That is, once those books are coming to us, the marketing department, sales and marketing, which we'll get to later, have to go identify those people. How do you reach them? How do you find that audience? So that doesn't really answer your question, but when it comes to the strength of any kind of academic press, it will shift a little bit over the years. The best way to find out what a publisher is good at is to look at their list, look at what look at the catalogs from the last couple of years, and you might see that things have shifted in terms of what books are coming up, what the topics are, and so on. If you're, really want to know what Notre Dame's good at, look at the last, 3-4 seasonal catalogs. We do 2 seasons a year, a fall and a spring season. Look at those and you'll see some of the things that we're strongest in. So, okay. So proposals will sometimes come in cold. Many of them will, but we may also solicit them. Acquisitions editors go out. They try to meet scholars in the field. They go to conferences. They used to visit campuses quite a lot. Pandemic kind of shut that down. Conferences now are getting a little bit different. So there's various techniques they use to try to get to know the scholars. They might have an idea for a book that would fit with us really well. We've got a couple of these kinds of books. It would be nice to have this kind of book. Who would be an author who could write this? Go out and find an author. Say, is this something you're already working on? Would you want to make this a project? That sort of thing. So sometimes books can be solicited. Oftentimes we're just getting the proposals. Eventually we will get a whole manuscript from an author. Sometimes they're ready for us right away. It might be a revised dissertation. It might be a second book that they've been working on and they're shopping around. It might be something we solicited. But they will give us a whole manuscript. The acquisitions editor will give it as much of a read as they can. It may not surprise you that, in fact, you don't get to just sit around reading when you work in publishing. There's a lot more to do. It is kind of the picture everybody has, but unfortunately, it's not the case. But the acquisitions editor will take a look. They might go back and say, I see some issues with this. You might want to do a little bit of this first. But they may just say, okay, this looks like a worthwhile project. But acquisitions editors are not scholars in their own right in the field necessarily. So they're going to go start looking for peer reviews. The next thing up on the slide, meaning scholars who are specialists in the field. And they will ask them, would you be willing to read this manuscript and give us a report on it? Tell us strengths, weaknesses. Are there problems in the argument? Is it particularly groundbreaking scholarship? All these sorts of things. And typically we try to get at least 2. Sometimes we'll have 3 people write a peer review for us. That peer review will come back to us. It will be shared with the author. If both of those peer reviews come back and they're really awful and say, this is just a horrendous book, we're probably going to have to give them to the author and say, I think we're done with the project at this point. You can have these reviews. Maybe you try to improve it, but at this point, we're kind of out on this. If they come back mixed, saying this is a really good book, but it needs this, then we'll generally talk with the author. Do you want to try to make these changes? Do these seem legitimate to you? Can you do this work? In which case, we allow them to decide whether or not they want to revise. If peer reviews come back really positive, this is great, publish it now, get it out as fast as you can, which happens sometimes. We're going to move ahead with that. And we're going to go ahead and almost always there's a little bit of revision here and there. So we share that with the author. And that's, I mean, ideally an author appreciates that, right? It's other voices, people who gave it a careful look at the manuscript, not just a paper you've given at a conference, but this is the whole manuscript. And so they get some useful information back. They revise that book. Hopefully they're comfortable with it being a little bit better. And they will try to get that final revision to us. It's around this point where we're going to go to our editorial board. So our editorial board is made up of a number of faculty members. I think we've got 6 or 7 right now. It fluctuates a bit. The acquisitions department will put together a packet of material for them. So they'll write a cover letter for this. They'll have the author's CV. They'll have a table of contents, and they'll share with them the peer reviews as well as the author response to that. And then the editorial board exercises some discretion to say, is this appropriate for Notre Dame to be publishing? They're a check to make sure we have done our homework, that we have actually gone and gotten legitimate peer reviewers. The peer reviewers have, given attention to the book, have actually given useful feedback, and they will say yay or nay to the book. We always, whenever we take something to the editorial board, we hope, we plan for them to say yes, because we've got confidence in the book. We've put together the information we need for them to be able to say, yes, this is a legitimate project. Sometimes something slips by and they catch something we haven't thought of. They might say no to a book or send it back for some revisions. But the editorial board is an extra check to make sure we're doing our job correctly. If the editorial board approves, we'll go back to the author. We'll get a contract filled out. Fairly standard kinds of things, in terms of who has rights to the material, what the royalties are going to be, and so on. Once that's done, we've got the author on board, we've got a final manuscript. It's time to transmit the book within the press, which means we're going to take that manuscript and we're going to give it to everybody else in the press. That'll take us to our next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Excellent. So the transmittal stage for us is when the entire team starts to get involved in the project. So up until now, our acquisitions team is the main people working with the author on the project. This is the point where everybody starts to come together with their plans. Everybody will take a look at the project, they'll take a look at the acquisitions editors pitch for the book, and they'll decide what is going to work for their department to make sure that we're adding the most value to the project and that we're able to publish it in a successful way. So a big part of that is how are we actually going to price the book and what's going to be our strategy for getting it out into the market. So this is something, it can vary depending on the press of who takes the lead on it. At our press, it tends to be myself and my department. Steffi Marchman, who introduced us, does a lot of the work with me as well on this. So what we do as a nonprofit publisher is we work to ensure we can get the biggest reach possible in the most efficient way, which is the best value of our resources and the university's resources, and then we make the book as affordable as possible for as many people as possible. How do we figure all that out? It's a lot of research. So I do something that we call looking at comps. So I'll do a lot of research on other books we've published in the subject area, other books the author has published, and then other books that competing presses have published. So other university presses, sometimes some other academic presses, and I'll try to come up with how many copies do I think this book could sell, worst case scenario and best case scenario. How big is that range, and how much do I think our press, our team at Notre Dame Press can move the book within that range? If it's a wide range and we're able to move the book very far forward in how many copies the book can sell, that becomes a higher priority book for us, in that we can invest more resources and we can help that author reach a far larger audience. If it's a book that has a more selective range, and we are known in that field, for example, where there's not a lot of, the more effort we put into it, we're not going to reach very many more people, then that becomes what we would call a lower priority book. Not in terms of the impact of the scholarship or how many ideas or potentially the power of that book to shape the scholarly conversation, but just in terms of our ability to help that book reach the larger audience. Once we have an idea of how many copies we're going to sell, and how much it's going to cost us to produce the book well, so how much is copy editing going to cost, how much is typesetting going to cost, then I put all of those numbers into a spreadsheet, and I come up with how affordably can I price this book for us to break even. So once again, we're a nonprofit press. Most of our academic books are ultimately going to lose us money. They're not even going to cover overhead costs and other businessy things that we're not going to get too much in detail on today. But our goal is that for each book we publish, we price it as affordably as we can while getting back the primary or direct costs that go into it. So things like the copy editing and typesetting. In some cases, these books are expensive to produce. They have important images that are really matter to the argument. They're very large, hefty, or they need a lot of copy editing because there's a lot of complications involved. And in some cases, other universities or other departments will actually provide money to help fund those projects and keep the price low. It all kind of goes back to that scholarly ecosystem. So we take all of that into account when we're doing the pricing. The other thing that's essential to the success of the book is going to be the packaging. So our team will come together, we bring representatives from each department, and we'll talk about the cover and the title, what is going to be the best way to help get this book picked up by people in the field. That does not mean what do I think is going to look best on every single cover. So there are a lot of subject areas where people tend to expect a certain thing. For example, if you are a military history reader, if you go into the military history section of a bookstore, you're going to see a lot of the books kind of feel the same. They all fit. So we want to make sure that those audiences look and they expect to see the book in that field. It doesn't matter if I personally think they're all hideous, which I don't necessarily, but it matters that it's going to stand out, but not too much. You're not going to, a romance cover has a very different feel than a military history cover, for example. So that's kind of what we're going to be working with in that. And then making sure that the author's happy as well. We care deeply about author satisfaction, but we also want to make sure that authors are informed on the ways that we can help position their book to succeed.
And just to be clear, we do produce some military history. We do not publish romance novels.
So those are some of the things that we'll do, and we'll come together right around the transmittal meeting. This is also the point where, like I said, all the departments are working on their planning. So this is where the marketing department puts together a lot of our plans that are going to shape how we promote the book a year from now when it comes out. So marketing, publicity, and sales are all about finding the most effective ways to connect books with readers. It's fundamentally problem solving. It can be a really fun and a really frustrating job. So marketing involves all of the different ways that we're going to work to connect those books with readers, retailers, and libraries. It can include advertising, email newsletters, social media events, and more. And just to break that down a little bit, marketing is basically all the ways that we promote things. Publicity is encouraging other people to tell their readers about books. So for example, media outlets, NPR, and then sales is directly selling books. Typically that means directly selling to other organizations and businesses, but it can also mean directly selling to readers, like you guys at this book festival. This is something the marketing and sales team takes the lead on because we're helping to get books directly into the hands of people. So all these people work together, and at this transmittal stage, we come up with our plan and we coordinate, and we all help work on something called metadata, which is all of the information that you might want to know about a book to decide if you're going to buy it. Things like the book description, how many pages is it? Does it have illustrations? What does the table of contents look like? So at this stage, we'll get all of those details together and we'll get them out to all of the retailers, especially online, but also through catalogs. And then we'll also come up with that comprehensive marketing plan and communicate that to the author, let them know how they can help us promote the book, and let them know what they can expect from us and what we'll be able to do from them as well, so that everybody's excited and jazzed up. And at that point, the book will move into production with our editorial and production teams, and marketing gets to take a little pause and work on a bunch of other stuff before we come back to the book later.
Okay, so we now have the manuscript at the EDP. I think I mentioned that earlier, editorial design and production. So this is a traditional way of talking about this certain part of the book production process. In a lot of, this is another one of those examples of in different places this might be organized a different way. I'm the managing editor at Notre Dame Press. At other presses, a managing editor might actually oversee both the textual things and the design things. They might have a lead in both of those. In my case, I'm more the text. Someone else, Wendy McMillan, whose name I'll drop probably as we talk about some of this, does the design work. And so we really work closely together instead of having one of us up on the top. So again, just different presses do things a little different way. So one of the first things that needs to happen with a manuscript is the copy editing. We do almost all of our copy editing freelance. We do have one in-house copy editor. I will occasionally do a small project in-house. We have an assistant production editor who I'll get to him in a little later, but he occasionally does a small editing project. The point of copy editing is to catch any kind of error in the text. So just, despite the fact that 5 people have read this thing completely, multiple times, the author's been over it, there's still going to be an error in there. We still find errors in printed books because it's managed to go past 20 sets of eyes and nobody's caught an error. So the copy editor is going to find everything they can. They're going to work both on grammar but also on style, punctuation, all the little nitty gritty details, references, endnotes, bibliography. Those are the things that probably require the most careful attention. They're the arcane system that people know the basics, but they don't know the niceties. Copy editors are supposed to know that. So that sort of thing will be taken care of at the copy editing stage. Generally, you'll have a single copy editor on the book. That person will go through the whole manuscript, probably more than once. We do electronic proof copy edit at this point. We used to do things by hand. I used to have little tiny scribbles all over a manuscript, hand cramped by the end of it. Would send it to the author, and hopefully that author would be able to read my handwriting. And I did have one complain that my handwriting was far too small, and he had to get out a magnifying glass to see it. But now it's electronic, so it's in Word. So now it's just the complaint is I can't read any of this. There's too many red marks all over the page. It all depends on how well they know word tracking, and plenty know it. They're familiar with it enough. But we're gonna, as a copy editor, you're gonna work with the author through that process. You'll tell them, I want to do this, but I see you've done something else a lot of the way along. So is this something I can bring you up to what our Chicago manual of style, which is what our house style is, or is there a reason it has to stay the way you've done it, things like that. So there's back and forth with the author, but ultimately we're going to deliver a full copy edited manuscript to the author. The author is going to do a review of copy editing. So they're going to go through, they're going to answer any questions that the copy editor put in there. They're going to approve changes. They may reject changes. I understand you rearranged this sentence, but it doesn't mean the same thing anymore. So I need it to go back to the way it was. That copy editor will then clean up those files so that all that colorful track changes are gone, and it'll come back to me, and I'll have a nice set of clean Word files. We add some coding so that we know what some of the different parts of the manuscript are, and I hand that over to Wendy in the production. So Wendy will take that book and she will do an interior design. So that means making choices about font and size and spacing and so on. And how are we going to deal with figures and tables and so on. Then it's going to go off to a compositor. And a compositor is somebody who lays out the book. So they work in Quark or InDesign, for example, to do a page layout and flow everything so that it meets the design specs that Wendy put together for them. Most of that is done by freelancers. In our case, most of it's done by freelancers. Wendy will do half a dozen or more a year. And that takes quite a long time. It can take a number of weeks to get everything clean and neat. That will then come back to me, and I will send it off. Well, I shouldn't say it just comes to me. It gets put up for the press to use because it's also going to go to sales and marketing. We'll get to in a minute. My part of it is I take it, I send it to a proofreader. We still use proofreaders. A lot of academic presses don't because it's expensive. It is an added step and an added cost. And we'll send it to the author so the author can do proofreading as well. Those two people will work simultaneously. It'll come back to us, at which point most books go to my assistant production editor, David Juarez, who has been at the desk. And if you come back to the book festival tomorrow, you'll find him too in the morning if you want to talk to him about this job. He does what's called a collate, meaning he puts those two sets of corrections together. He has to make sure they all make sense. Every once in a while, proofreaders make mistakes too, so sometimes you have to ignore them. Sometimes proofreaders won't accept the fact that an editor made an exception to Chicago Manual of Style, and we'll have to erase 100 marks because every time we change something at proofs, it costs money. Every little change is an additional charge. So if somebody left commas before because, which is not a thing you usually want, and the proofreader marked 100 of them, we're probably going to let that comma go, and we're going to save ourselves $100 because every one of those change costs $1. So he'll also, the David, our production editor, when he does this collate, will also decide when an author has asked for a change, is this a legitimate change to ask for? We tell authors along the whole way, have it right when you give it to us as best you can. Check it at review of copy editing so it's as good as it can be. We don't want to make the change at proofs, but every once in a while things just slip through. Sometimes a mistake gets introduced. Sometimes they decide they want to rewrite something. And sometimes we just have to say no to that. We have to, this is going to change things. We can't add notes. If we add note number 3 in chapter 1 that has 60 notes, that means we're changing 57 note numbers in the text and 57 note numbers at the end of the book. If you're good at math, that's 114 changes. We don't need that many at proof stage. So we're going to reject it. We're going to say you have to come up with some other solution, and David will work with them to do that sort of thing. That set of page proofs. So at that point, the proofs have a lot of corrections marked, hopefully not too many. They go back to Wendy for production. She gives it back to the compositor who makes the changes, comes back to us now as second proofs. We're not always very creative in the names. The second proofs are going to be checked to make sure everything we'd requested was done right. That's also the point when an index would get added. I don't have index on here. We're not going to go into details, but ask me about indexes if you want. We'll add an index so that we'll check that at the second pass. And then hopefully almost everything's right. Typically, we have to make just a few more changes. And then at that point, we get final files, and Wendy is ready to send them off to the printer. Now, before we talk about the printer, let's talk about how sales and marketing are going to use proofs before the book is actually made.
Perfect. So the proof stage is really the first time it starts to look and feel like a book. So this is the great opportunity for marketing and sales to step in and get other people outside of the press excited about the book. Typically at this point, we're going to focus on people who want to talk about the book before it comes out. So that's going to be people in the industry, people, reviewers at large publications or large media outlets, bookstores, libraries, that kind of thing. So that's going to be our main focus, is this industry focus at this point. So we take the proofs and we will either make digital galleys or printed galleys that basically it looks like a book, it feels like a book, it's just not quite perfectly polished yet. So then our publicity and marketing director will actually send those out to national outlets and things like that. Before the pandemic, she would actually go to New York and directly pitch to places like the New York Times, which is a really cool, really nerve-wracking job. But now with the pandemic, a lot of people are working from home, so she'll either do email pitches or she might do some Zoom pitches and get people excited about the book and considering covering the book. Again, this is going to be the largest outlets who are excited to write about the book before it comes out. If we're talking about some of the academic journals, they care more that they have the pristine text, they have all of the scholarly ideas, than that they can publish a review before the book's out. So they're going to wait for the final copy. But it's going to be these big publications or publications that have to publish for someone who needs the information early, like Library Journal, that publishes reviews specifically for libraries. Imagine that. The other thing we're going to do is, at this stage, I will have go to what's called a sales conference, usually a Zoom conference, and I will pitch the book to our sales reps. I get them excited about the book, and then they'll go out into the field and they will directly pitch to bookstores, to Barnes & Noble, that kind of thing, and again, get them excited. So enthusiasm carries through all the way from that first conversation with the acquisitions editor through to me, down to someone who works at an independent bookstore who's going to come in. You're going to come in the door and they're going to say, "This book is so cool," and that information is going to come all the way up the line and get passed through. So it's a good thing we all love what we do. The other thing we might do at this point, to a limited degree, is we may run some advertising, again, targeted toward people in the industry. People who are really excited about something 6 months before it comes out, and who are going to remember that excitement 6 months down the line to when the book is actually available. So there are certain email publications we might advertise in. There are still a few print publications that are targeted, again, like a Library Journal or Publishers Weekly, that are going to go out to those retail people who are going to get excited about the book in advance, put in orders, write reviews, that kind of thing. All of this, again, 6 months before the book comes out. Back to the printer.
Right. So there are two primary ways we print books. We either go to an offset printer, which is what you may traditionally think of as producing a whole bunch of books and then shipping us a big pallet of books. We now use more often, in fact, POD or print-on-demand books. There are companies now, and a big one is Lightning Source that we use, that are just constantly publishing books from digital files. They have a facility down in Tennessee that a number of us have been to visit, and it is just row after row of these huge printing presses that are just constantly cycling through these paper rolls, producing books. It prints them out, it cuts them, it binds them. There are people along each step to sort of keep track of things and to move piles, but they can produce the books very quickly. Now, what's the advantage of one over the other? So an offset printer tends to be cheaper per book, but you have to order a certain number of books. You have to be printing 1,000, 2,000 books to make it worth going to an offset printer. But an offset printer can do some nice things that POD printers can't. So if we expect a book is going to sell a few thousand copies, which most of our books don't, we haven't really talked about those numbers for you yet. If we think we're going to sell 3,000 copies, like we might of the memoirs of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, we're going to go to an offset printer. So an offset printer can make us a very nice jacket, nice paper. They can do neat stamped covers. So you've got the stamp on the spine and the front. They can produce the interior of the book is going to, it's just going to have a slightly different look and feel than a print on demand book will have. The printing tends to be a little sharper. If there are images, they tend to be better. They can use different kinds of paper. They have a greater choice, I should say, of the kinds of paper. So there's lots more flexibility with that. The problem is if you decide, I'm going to sell 5,000 of those books, and you print an order of 5,000, maybe 5,500, because you deal with a few damages and review copies and so on. And the book doesn't do as well as you think. It only sells 3,000 books. You're sitting on 2,000 books. You're paying for warehousing and you're paying for printing books that you never sold. So that's the potential to lose money. On the other hand, what if the book is a runaway bestseller and suddenly I need 10,000 of them? Well, an offset printer takes a few months to gear up your book and get ready to print it because there's other things on their schedule. So I may miss out on 5,000 sales because there's a demand for it right now. And in 3 months, when I can have the offset printer print it, that demand has gone away. But they do things that the PODs can't. Another example up here, feel free to come look at these at the end if you'd like to see. That Happy Returns book is this coffee table book. It's glossy paper, lots of nice color pictures. You got to have the best paper, the best printing you can for that. That's not going to look good from a print on demand. So that kind of book, the expectations for that kind of book mean it has to go offset. If, on the other hand, we think a book's only going to sell 100, 200, 300 copies, print on demand is a much more cost efficient way to do it. They will actually print the number we want. So if I decide I want 188 of these books, I can decide that close to the last minute and say, print me 188 books. That means we can wait for pre-orders. All that effort that marketing had done to get Barnes and Noble interested, to get independent bookstores interested, we get these back orders and we know how many books need to go out right now to fulfill the orders. We know how many books we need to send out for some reviews. We can give them a very precise number and they'll print them fast. It's not necessarily tomorrow, but it's 2 weeks from now. We'll have those books ready to go. They may have a slightly different quality to them. This one is probably a print on demand. If you come and look at these later, you'll see the print is fine. It's readable. It may be a little fuzzy if you've got a really good eye for those kind of things, or if you hold it right up to something else, you may notice it. This one's a fairly old book, so the font is a little funny, I think. I mean, to my eye now, it's a little funny compared to what we do now. So you have to ignore that kind of difference. But we're going to make that choice will actually be made early on, depending on the market, the numbers, and so on. So once we have those proofs ready, off we go to the printer, and we are waiting for books to arrive. Depending on the kind of printer, as I say, that can be the print on demand. We're usually going to get a check copy from them. So our production manager sends them the files, says, please send me a hardback and a paperback. Paperback comes to us in a week or two. The hardback comes maybe a couple weeks more than that. We look at them, make sure everything is good. We say, yep, it's good. Release it. And then they take whatever order we set, 150, 250, 188. They print those and they send them to where they need to go. A distribution warehouse to individual people, some of them to us, and so on. If we're doing offset, we'll send that order out. It's going to be a number of months away. They're going to produce a huge pallet. That pallet is going to go to the distributor, who in our case is closely associated with that print on demand company. That distributor will then send them out to all the places they need to go. And now we're back again to selling the actual books.
Excellent. And one thing too I'll say that's really neat about print on demand is that, as Matt mentioned, after we get those initial orders in, if you go online and you order a book from our website that's print on demand, it will actually be printed just for you and mailed straight from the printer out to you. So it really takes some of the risk involved, like Matt was talking about. With the offset books, we're relying a lot on, at our press, me, to come up with a perfect sales estimate, not too high, not too low, which, as you might imagine, if I could perfectly predict the future, I would yeah, I'd probably make a lot more money than I do now. But all the same, it can give us a little bit of flexibility. In the case of After Virtue that Matt held up, that's one of our best sellers every single month. It's not that we don't sell a ton of those books. It's that we set it up so we have the flexibility. We might do an offset run, but once we run out of those, we want it set up print on demand so that nobody is waiting for the Alistair McIntyre, because people do not like to wait for Alistair McIntyre. When they want to read Alistair McIntyre, they want their book. So we make sure that we're able to do that and keep that demand going. For some of the coffee table books, for example, if we run out of stock, we're out of stock until we can get more copies. So as much as we can, we utilize all the tools to make sure that books are in people's hands when they want them and when they're excited to read about them. Which goes back to marketing and promotion. How convenient. So a lot of the promotion really takes off the month before publication. That's when especially our social media campaigns will start ramping up, our email newsletters, and we'll start getting especially the end reader, the end consumer excited about the book. Can anybody guess why? I suppose I shouldn't do this since I have the Mac, but can anybody guess why we don't do it sooner? How long do you remember something that you hear about? Yeah, not very long. So if we start talking to you about a book that's coming out in 3 months, even if it is you are the most excited about it, you're probably not going to remember it. If it's far enough off, you're probably not even going to go pre-order it. I'm a book person. I love books. I read a lot of books. I also, because of my job, I read a lot of these advanced publications. I listen to a lot of radio ads about books. If I hear about a book 6 months in advance, even I don't go buy the book because I forget about it by then. And I don't pre-order it because I'll do that later. I've got time. So we wait until the month before so that it's close enough that you think, oh, I need to get that pre-order in now. Or you think, oh, that's going to be here next week. I better just go ahead and get the order in with my independent bookstore so they can get the book in time. So that's when we do a lot of that promotion. It's also when our marketing and publicity director, Catherine, goes back to do another round of publicity outreach. We try to get our final books between 2 and 4 weeks before the book actually publishes. So she can do a round of sending the final copy out one last chance for the New York Times to do a review, for example. As well as start sending them to the academic journals, the places that are going to put a little bit more time. They want that final copy, they want to select the perfect reviewer, and they want to make sure that they've got a really thorough, content-driven review out there. So she'll start doing that and really start to get the buzz out about the book. And we'll also, as I mentioned, do a lot of direct-to-consumer outreach. We'll do a lot of email blasts, do a lot of social media. We do some fun things. We've got some really great book trailers that go out. We'll also start taking the books to academic conferences and making sure that we're talking to scholars and getting them excited about the book. And we'll also start doing course adoption outreaches. So we'll email professors that might be relevant. They need a lot of lead time to consider a book for a class. They have to actually think about the book, they have to order the book, they have to read the book, and then they have to adapt their syllabus. So that's something where we typically don't see those types of sales for 6 to 12 months after the book comes out. It just takes time. So that's a lot of the promotion that we'll start doing, and then we'll continue that through, like I said, about a month before publication, through the exciting pub date, about another month, and then we've got more great books coming out. So we'll continue promoting all of our books, but we have to sort of move on. We've got limited time and start thinking about the next books. And then we actually have someone on our team who specializes in what we call backlist promotion, where they will actually go back through all of the books that have been out for a year, books that have been out for 40 years, and they'll do roundups and they'll think about ways to make sure that people continue to be excited about the books because they're still relevant. We have I think 1954 is our oldest book that continues to sell really well. It's the Bible and the Liturgy. You will probably not find it on that table because it sells so well that I don't have any stock in the office. But that's a book that continues to have an impact. And we have some gems like that no one knows about unless Katie, our team member who does this, reads about the book, learns about the book, and then gets other people excited about it. So what happens after that, though? Do we just put the book out there and move on with our lives and don't worry about it? No. We have to keep thinking about things. We're a small team. We want to make sure that we are using our resources effectively, whether it's time or money, which means we have to be constantly evaluating everything that we're doing, our marketing strategies, our sales strategies, what kind of books we're even acquiring. It's like there was a great question about what are the areas we specialize in. Well, we adapt based on how well we're doing. So again, the areas we publish in align with the strengths of Notre Dame, so they don't change a lot. But within the field of, for example, Latin American studies or theology, there's a lot of things that specific areas you can choose to focus on within that. So the marketing and sales team and the acquisitions team work closely together. We look at reports, the month the book comes out, the year, 2 years down the line, and we keep looking, how are the books selling? Are we doing everything we possibly can to make sure that we're reaching the right audience? And then, are we publishing too much in one area? Is there a specific theologian where we have covered the area? We completely own research around that theologian, and maybe we need to consider some other voices for a while because we've just saturated the market. So we try to balance all of those things. It's also an opportunity to see, is this book selling super well? Do we have a book that's priced at $85? It's a really important academic tome, and it's selling like hotcakes. Then we might want to consider putting out a paperback. Maybe it got picked up for courses that we thought it was a little too specialized for, and make sure that it's as widely as available as possible. If it's a book like After Virtue or Barrio Boy, two of our bestsellers that are here on the table, we might think about doing a new edition. Does the author want to do some updates? Is there new material that should be added? That kind of thing. The other thing we'll continue to do long after the book comes out is pitch it for subrights and consider permissions requests. We work with a rights agent out of Indiana University Press who will pitch our book for consideration to other publishers around the world, either, for example, for a French edition or maybe an English language edition in India, to make sure that our ideas are widely available around the globe. Another thing I'll mention is we've got a top-notch international sales team as well, so that our books are directly pitched to retailers in places like China, in Germany. There's a lot of English language scholars who will read English language books in those countries. We want to make sure, again, that the ideas are getting out there. With the permissions as well, we have a system where if professors want to use, for example, one chapter of a book in their classes, we have a system set up so they can request permission to be able to do that and have those lovely course packs built that you're probably familiar with. Or if someone wants to quote a section of the book in their own work. So we coordinate all of that. And again, going back to being a nonprofit publisher, we get a little bit of revenue for that, which goes back often quite a bit of it to the author, but we're also looking to ensure scholarly communication and all the latest ideas are in conversation with each other. So that's something that we're excited to be able to do. And that brings us pretty well through the process from a 10,000-foot overview. So now we have got some time for questions. So I believe Steffi's going to come over and help run our mic. So we are excited to dive into whatever area you guys want to learn more about.
Thank you so much. My first question is just, what is exactly the difference between proofreading and copy editing? And why is it so much more expensive to change everything for proofreading, every single number?
Sure. So, in terms of let's talk about it in practical terms. Copy editing, we're working with the Word files the author had. We can, in some sense, change anything we want at that point. Now, that's not entirely true because it's already gone through peer review. So it can't substantially change the book. Authors can't add a chapter. They can't decide, I don't want to say this anymore. I want to say this, because that hasn't been reviewed. That hasn't been through the process. So they can't do that sort of thing. But a copy editor, because we're in the Word files, can suggest any kinds of changes we need. That may be stylistic. It could be particular kinds of language that's being used. Anything else, that can all change at that point. Copy editing tends to be more expensive for the book. So I can't say this is true in every case, but copy editing is probably 4 to 5 times the cost of proofreading. The copy editor, what I'm going to pay a copy editor to copy edit the book will cost 4 to 5 times what it's going to cost for a proofreader to proofread the book. So the copy editor can make lots of changes, is responsible to know a lot of things. Is responsible to know all the grammar, all the style, all the rules, all of Chicago Manual of Style, that big thick book, and work with the author to get that kind of change. And actually, that's one of the extra things we're paying for, is for them to be able to work with the author and save me the constant barrage of questions and the details. And so they've got a lot of judgment they have to exercise. And when it comes to making certain decisions about what you might do in a text, I'm trying to think. There was an example of a book I was just happening to get ready over the last day or two. The author wanted to do a certain thing with some definitions they were making. They wanted it to appear on the page in a certain way, but the author doesn't necessarily get to dictate that. And so the copy editor has to, talk with them diplomatically and say, I'll convey your wishes, but they'll create a design for the book. It has to look good for the book. Your particular idea about setting a list with centered bold terms, and so we don't want the author to do that. So there's that direct interactions. That's another thing you're paying for. When it comes to proofreading, at that point the book has already been laid out, so it's already been put into the Express or InDesign files. I don't know if you're familiar with those. That's the thing that makes it look like a book. that for the, I mean, just the way the industry works is they produce that. There's a given cost for that. When we come back and ask for a change, every change we make costs money. That's just the standard because the compositor has to go in and make the change in the file. If you want to replace a short word with a long word, you're going to bump a little bit of the next line. You're going to bump other things. You have to watch the page. The line breaks. If you've ever used a Word document and you know what justification is, where everything, okay, so if you make it left and right justified so that both columns are the same, you probably have seen you get big gaps or you get words pushed together. The layout programs are more sophisticated in the way they do that, and they allow you little more freedom to play with that. But if you just replace a word, chances are things might bump down, and so it may move. If things jump from page to page, that's actually an additional cost. They have to look and see what kind of effect that has. It also has an effect on the index. I didn't really talk about indexes, but if you add a sentence, right? I mean, changing a word probably won't do a lot, particularly because paragraphs often have a little space at the end. But if you change a sentence and add a sentence, multiple lines move, and that means that the reference to Thomas Aquinas that was on the bottom of page 88 is now at the top of page 89. You got to go change the index. Somebody has to look for that and find it. So we really discourage changes at that point for that reason as well. So a proofreader, in addition to just looking for typos and clear errors, are also doing a little bit of looking at the layout. So they're making sure all the page numbers are there. We had an example years ago where a book with parts, so you might have you have a part page 1, part 1 name, a blank page on the back, and then chapter 1 starts. You have 2 chapters, maybe 3 chapters, and then there's a new part page, and then there's a blank page, and the next chapter starts. They forgot to number the part pages. Well, I should say you don't actually put the number on the part pages, but they count. So the chapter ended on page 100, and then you should have had page 101 be the part page, a blank 102, and then the next chapter starts on 103. They skipped the part page, and they went from 100, blank page, and then it was 101. It's the wrong page, which means everything else changes, which means your index has gotten completely off and everything would have to change. So I forget why I actually brought up that example, but these are there's complications. Sorry, now I remember. The proofreader is looking for that sort of thing to make sure that kind of mistake hasn't been made. They're looking at how words get broken at the end of the line. They're looking at consistency of way headings in the chapter. You might have an A level head, and then you might have a B level head. Those need to be consistent across the book. So they're looking to make sure those things were all done the same. But there's not the freedom to rewrite at that point. So if a proofreader runs across something and says, that could have been better phrased, too bad. It's too late for that. So I don't know if that fully answered your question. It gives you some of the differences of what they do, but okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then
you have more?
kind of a follow-up question would be, how do you find, is proofreading also freelance, and how do you find your freelancers?
Okay, so we'll try to do so yes, proofreading for us is freelance. If I have a very short project, occasionally David, the production editor, will do a little bit of that for me. How we find them can be a little tricky. There are freelance indexes are sometimes done by freelancers. It's the responsibility of the author for our contract, for the author to produce it in some way. They could go hire somebody, they can do it themselves. We also say, if you want us to arrange one, we'll just bill you for whatever they charge us, but we'll find one for you. There is an American Society of Indexing that you can get certification with, and you can find people through there. You will get lots of cold solicitations. I want to be a freelance editor, or I've been a freelance editor for these presses and I'd like to expand my clientele. Word of mouth, you might get somebody new comes into your press and they have some names and they say, here's some more people for you to try. I will say that I assume the question also comes from sort of how would you potentially get into the business? Again, that's tricky. There are a few places that offer coursework on it. University of Chicago, for example, does a copy editing or an editing program. Can't remember if they do a proofreading one or not. So that can get you some of the basic skills. Breaking into the industry is the hardest thing because It is easier, from my point of view, to have somebody who's experienced and kind of understands the ropes, and knows what's expected of them, even if it's going to be a little different what I expect them from them as opposed to somebody else. I'd like them to have the experience. So you have to take kind of whatever job you can manage. Um, I think we could talk in more detail, um, about, how is it you try to contact. What do you tell them when you send them a cold solicitation? You know, don't tell them you love to read, because yes, if you're interested in publishing, you better. So the notion of that you understand it's a business, you have to meet deadlines, you're ready to be coached, but you've got some experience. Um, Take whatever experiences you can. If there's an undergraduate journal or a graduate journal, if you are a grad student and there's a professor who's reviewing an article, proofread it for them. I mean, I have to say, the fact that you've done that once or twice doesn't really convince me you can do a freelancer's job. But building up that kind of experience is sort of what you've got to go with, and you have to keep trying. I will say, sometimes I've occasionally had reference, a person who's got a fantastic resume, very good letter. I just don't have any work for him right now. I keep them on file if I'm, ever missing somebody. And every once in a while, somebody gets lucky and says, I could do some copy editing for you. And I say, well, I've got this manuscript that's been sitting and needs to go out. I'm going to take a chance, because you want to make sure you have enough people. So, um, more, I mean, is there more that I can say to you?
That's good for
Okay.
now. Yeah, thank
All
you.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Other questions?
I'll say real quick too that using your local university press as a resource for asking questions exactly like that can be helpful as well. Other questions?
So like aside from proofreading, what are the other like members of this process that are directly employed by the university press rather than sort of hired elsewhere?
Oh, outside of freelancers.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, that will depend on the circumstances of the business. Um, One of the things I should have said and I did not is that many university presses get some kind of subsidy from their university. Notre Dame gives us a very generous one. Notre Dame is taking that responsibility very seriously. They give us a large subsidy. Many of the state colleges, of course, universities, their budget's not under their own control. The state legislature can have something, so that can shrink. Press subsidies may be a sacrifice that gets made. Generally speaking, boy, do we go through everything. You're going to have a director. You're going to have an acquisitions team of some kind. So in our case, we have the director who acquires. We have two acquisitions editors, and we have one editorial assistant that works with acquisitions. And sometimes those assistants are doing some of the acquisitions themselves. Sometimes they are just doing doing correspondence or file preparation on behalf of somebody else. You'll have an EDP department, which could be, in our case, me, the managing editor. Wendy is our production and design manager. David is our assistant production editor. And we have an in-house manuscript editor. At a lot of other presses, there will be some EDP folks may do kind of a limited editing file preparation. You might have more than one person managing projects. You might have somebody in-house doing some of the proofreading. I think when they do that, it tends to be more about make sure the page looks okay kind of thing, as opposed to a close read. We only have one person. Wendy does all the design and production, manages all that, and she's also the one who arranges the printers. A lot of places will have an additional person that would help her. They might do some more compositing. They might be working with images. They might be cleaning up image files, checking on permissions, those sorts of things. And then you've got a sales and marketing, and I don't think I've got a real great sense of.
I'll take that back.
Industry standards.
Yeah, so there are, again, a lot of different presses can break up marketing and sales different ways. So there are different, it's really interesting to look through university press contact lists or staff lists to see like the percentages of each department and then what kind of titles are in each department. But common roles for marketing and sales include usually you have some sort of a department head, either marketing manager, marketing and sales director, it can be called all sorts of things. So someone who oversees kind of helps make sure the department is working well together and keeps a big picture eye. Because we're all nonprofits and there's always more you can do in marketing, usually that position will also specialize in something else. So for me, I do our sales and development work in addition to leading that department. You'll have someone who does publicity typically, and that is the getting other people excited to write about the books. You'll have someone who oversees the more general marketing, so the advertising, sometimes the author contact, sometimes the social media, the publicity person who can also be called a publicist. Sometimes they'll do social media and author contact as well. Some presses will have someone who specializes in direct consumer promotion, which might mean email marketing. It might mean literally mailing things out. And then you'll often have a sales manager or some sort of a salesperson. Some presses will actually have sales representatives on their staff. So some of the larger presses, our domestic sales team is the Columbia University Press sales team, where they represent Columbia University Press books, and then they will also have other presses commission their sales team to do pitch work as well. Who else am I forgetting? We have it's not a very common position, but we have our backlist promotion person, who's our marketing and sales assistant. And then we have a metadata, we call her our digital assets manager, who coordinates our metadata process, manages our website, that kind of thing. Ebooks, yeah, ebook creation. Anybody else I forgot?
I'm going to take it because she is the assistant director. Not everywhere will have an assistant director, depending on how a director wants to run things. They might want, they might be satisfied with just department heads. They might want to have an assistant director who can work with the different ones. And so in this case, Michelle did that. She's well suited to the job. It could have been somebody else. It could have been somebody in acquisitions. It could have been somebody in EDP. But in our case, it came because Michelle was best suited to it. She happens to be in sales and marketing. It's not because she was in sales and marketing that she became assistant director. We also have a business manager. That's not always a job on its own. Sometimes that's mixed with something else. Or that's her job responsibility. One of the things we don't have is a rights person. We use an outside contractor for that. There are a number of academic presses where the EDP is focused. There's larger number of people who are actually laying out the books. They do some more of that in-house. The editing and the proofreading just tends to be so time intensive that that's better done with freelancers than with trying to have enough staff to do that. So, did you come up with anybody else while I was? Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah.
I think we have time for about one more question, but I will say too that we are around for the book festival tomorrow as well, and we are over in Flanner Hall. So if you ever have any other questions, this isn't your last time to ask. Any other questions for this particular panel?
One last plug I'll make is that we have a really great student internship program. So if you're interested in working in publishing, one of the best ways to confirm it's a good career for you and also to get experience to help you get that first job is through an internship. So we do have, as I mentioned, a great program where you can apply to work with different departments. We will let you know the one that is best suited for you or that has an opening. And our positions are paid, and we make sure that they're a really great hands-on learning experience. You will be working side by side with our team members, getting a lot of direct feedback. It's not a coffee making, it's not a file copying type internship. There is some office work, but it's the same work that our team members do as well. So it's a really great opportunity. All right.
Our students helped us put together this book festival.
And I should mention the application deadline for spring is December 2nd. So apply today. Thank you.
There are some books up here if you want to come take a look at anything, and we'll hang out for a little bit if you've got some questions you didn't want to ask in front of everybody. But thanks for your attention today. Appreciate you being here.